Have you ever wondered why certain prophecies seem to have been erased from our collective memory almost, as if someone wanted them never to be told? The story of Nahum is one of them. A prophet who didn't bring hope, but destruction. Who didn't call for repentance, but pronounced judgment. And the strangest part? Everything he said came true. While many still quote Jonah as the preacher of mercy for Nineveh, few remember Nahum the prophet, who came later to declare that God's judgment would no longer be delayed. It was as if heaven had decided it was time to end the story. And when that moment came, even kings trembled. But what few people know is that behind Nahum's message, there was more than just a prophecy. There were buried secrets, blood pacts, spiritual corruption, and persecution that had haunted the city since its very foundation. Nineveh didn't fall just because of its since it fell, because it carried an ancient curse. If you enjoy stories that mix faith, mystery, conspiracy, and divine justice, get ready. What you're about to discover about Nahum, Nineveh, and the forbidden prophecy will forever change how you read the Bible and maybe even how you see your own faith. The fall of Nineveh wasn't just an urban disaster, it was a spiritual turning point. Imagine a city that seemed invincible, fortified on the outside and proud within. Nineveh flaunted its wealth, grand temples, and a culture that mesmerized even skeptics. But behind the gold, there was blood, and Nahum, the prophet, was chosen to announce that heaven's bill had come due. Nahum's prophecy didn't bring comfort. It was sharp like a blade. He spoke of divine wrath with a conviction that frightened even the boldest, and no one wanted to listen. People laughed. Leaders mocked. It was easier to keep feasting than a fast. But the word never returns empty. And Nahum's visions weren't born of fanaticism, they came from a divine purpose. While Nineveh celebrated its victories, ominous signs hovered over Assyria. Ancient accounts tell of starless nights and terrifying omens that shook even seasoned soldiers. And yet they ignored them. Nahum warned, "This city will bleed from its pride." And bleed it did. Destruction came through fire, swords, and chaos, but the judgment itself was like a silent thunder. In the end, the ruins of Nineveh told more than a tale of war, they echoed divine justice. A justice that can't be bought with gold or canceled by hollow rituals. It was as if God said, "You had your chance." And that question still haunts us today. How many times do we ignore the warnings? How often does our comfort blind us to the fact that collapse might be hiding behind our next decision? Nahum didn't come from nobility. He was born into a simple home, humble, but deeply reverent of the sacred. He grew up hearing the stories of the Exodus, of ancient judgments and divine rescues. His family wasn't influential, but their faith was firm, almost stubborn. And it was in that soil of tradition and awe that the seeds of prophecy began to take root in his heart. As a boy, Nahum sensed he was different. While others dreamed of war and glory, he wrestled with visions and emotions he couldn't explain. At times, he would sit still for hours listening to voices no one else could hear. It scared him, but also drew him in. It was like a calling in. That calling only grew louder with time. One stormy night, he had his first clear vision. Nineveh in flames, screams echoing through the streets, and a voice saying, "Speak what you see." From that moment, Nahum knew his life would never be normal again. He tried to run from it, but every time he stayed silent, his body trembled and his soul burned. There was no escaping it. He was a prophet even if he hadn't chosen to be. And even under the weight of such a mission, Nahum didn't fall into despair. He sought the scribes, read ancient scrolls, studied the prophecies of those who came before him. He wanted to understand what God was revealing. And the more he read, the more he walked a razor-thin line between mercy and judgment. He wasn't just a messenger, he carried God's heartbeat inside his chest. Nineveh had been spared once, remember? When Jonah prophesied its destruction, the city repented. But that repentance didn't last. Over time, their hearts hardened again like iron under the sun. Kings fell into lust. The temple became a stage for mockery, and the altars ran red with innocent blood. Human sacrifices returned, as if the past had been deliberately forgotten. For Nahum, this descent was devastating. He watched the streets filled with wild celebrations and priests bribed with foreign gold. Nineveh wasn't just sinning, it was provoking heaven with pride. And in that context, Nahum's visions turned darker and darker. Burning bodies, flames licking the walls, and drums drowning out the screams. Some nights, he woke up gasping, claiming he smelled burning flesh in the wind. Voices whispered his name in his sleep, delivering new revelations. A pattern emerged. Nineveh's evil wasn't just political or cultural, it was spiritual. As if the city had been built on a cursed foundation that cried out for justice. Nahum knew these weren't hallucinations. They carried urgency, a divine weight he couldn't ignore. And the more the city celebrated false gods, the louder the visions became. It was as if God was saying, they've chosen their path. Now they'll see where it ends. And Nahum could only watch and declare. He chose the central square of Nineveh to proclaim his prophecy, a place of trade, debate, and entertainment where the city's pride was on full display. He climbed a stone, raised his voice, and shouted judgment into the wind. This city will fall, its walls will turn to dust. But instead of repentance, he was met with laughter, jeers, mockery. First came the youth, then nobles, then soldiers, even the priests. They called him mad, a fanatic, a traitor. Some threw rotten fruit, others threatened prison. But he didn't flinch. He stood there firm, as if every insult only confirmed his message. It was as if he were saying, laugh now, but remember me when the walls come down. But over time, Nahum's persistence began to raise eyebrows. Some elders paused to listen. Women covered their mouths at certain words, almost as if they already knew. And then, on a hot and heavy afternoon, a cloaked figure approached. It was the king disguised. Nahum recognized him, but said nothing. The king stood silently, then confessed. As a boy, he had a strange dream, his city burning, and a man declaring, it was written from the beginning. When he heard Nahum speak, that same chill ran down his spine. He didn't order anything, didn't say a word, but in his eyes something had cracked. Because power may mock, but it cannot escape truth. Malach was no ordinary man. A temple scribe, raised among sacred texts, hidden knowledge, and stories never shared with the public. The first time he heard Nahum, something ancient stirred within him. Head read forbidden passages, entries the high priest swore didn't exist. Now, Nahum's words made everything click, and that terrified him. Driven by fear and curiosity, Malach sought out Haritan, elder from the original guardians of the temple. Together, they explored locked rooms and ancient archives. That's when they found an old scroll sealed in black wax, covered in dust. It told something horrifying. Nineveh was founded on the sacrifice of children. Its power sealed with innocent blood. That was the original curse. The king knew, the leaders knew, but no one dared speak because even the city's grounds seemed bound by a living pact. Malach and Hart spent sleepless nights decoding the symbols. And as they dug deeper, they realized Nineveh's glory was built on cursed foundations, a ritual that demanded renewal disguised as tradition. This wasn't just corruption, it was a pact with the abyss. One quiet night, Malach sought out Nahum. They spoke like brothers, bound by fate, connected by visions and the urgency of truth. Malach knew exposing the truth meant persecution, but silence would make him part of the lie. And from that unlikely union, a prophet and a scribe grew the seed of final confrontation, divine revelation versus political power. Truth has a price. In Nineveh, that price was blood. Shortly after revealing their discovery, Malach and Hart began to be watched. Their movements in the temple caught the attention of religious leaders. Palace guards started patrolling near Hart's house. There were eyes everywhere. Even the walls seemed to listen. The city that once mocked Nahum now turned against those who dared confirm his words. One moonless night, Hart was dragged from his home. He didn't even have time to scream. His body was found 2 days later, dumped in the town square with a warning. A mouth that speaks too much is silenced forever. Malach was devastated, but he didn't retreat. He knew Hart had died for something greater. It was the kind of pain that turns fear into courage. But deep down he knew he was next. He was betrayed by someone Closia, student who pretended to help, but was actually working for the king's priests. Malak was captured while trying to hide the scrolls they had found. They took him not to question him, but to use him. They declared that his death would be a new sacrifice, just like in ancient times meant to restore the sacred covenant between the city and its gods. History was repeating itself. Only now, Malak knew what was behind it. While Nahum kept proclaiming destruction, Malak was paraded as a traitor. But something in the city began to shift. Whispers spread. People started questioning the official story. Even soldiers began showing signs of doubt. The persecution didn't silence the truth, it fueled it. Because when truth bleeds, it can no longer be hidden. And in every corner of the city, tension rose as if even heaven was holding its breath. Then it happened like the sky itself answered with fury. Days after Harit's execution and Malak's arrest, the city began to collapse not by enemy armies, but by nature itself. The ground shook, splitting walls that once seemed indestructible. Rivers overflowed with the stench of rot. Insects invaded the fields. Plagues hit animals and humans alike. Crops withered for no reason. And Nineveh's gods remained silent. The people ran to the temples with offerings, sacrifices, desperate rituals. But the more blood they shed, the more chaos escalated. Even the royal magicians couldn't stop it. Some whispered that the earth itself was rejecting the city's foundation, tired of upholding so much injustice. Others blamed Malak, calling him a living curse, and decided he should be offered as a human sacrifice. Nahum, watching from afar, raised his voice once more. You're not being punished by your gods, but by the one who is justice. His words echoed through the despair. What was once mockery now sounded like living prophecy. Nineveh was no longer a city, it was an open wound. And Malak, chained, waited for a sentence that might seal the final chapter of this bloody history. Inside the walls, fear turned into madness. Citizens turned on one another. Priests fought among themselves. And the king, locked away in his palace, had no answers left. The judgment didn't come from outside. It came from their own choices. And through it all, the wind howled like it was crying for justice. With each new disaster, a question lingered. Was this the symbolic apocalypse Nahum had seen? The day came. Malak was taken to the great ceremonial altar in Nineveh's oldest temple. The entire city stood still, not out of faith but fear. The scene was surreal: priests dressed in mourning, guards with veiled faces, and the crowd in eerie silence. Malak, though weak and bruised, kept his eyes steady. He knew this moment was bigger than himself. Placed on the altar, he spoke not with screams or pleas, but with clarity. You built this city on the blood of innocence. But this time, it won't be blood that saves you, it will be the truth. The impact was immediate. Many lowered their heads. Others whispered among themselves. The execution was halted when the restless king ordered that Malak be heard. For the first time in ages, truth had a voice. Even on the edge of death, Malak spoke it all. The cursed foundation, the hidden records, the conspiracy among the scribes, the dark pact. Not to avenge, but to liberate. His words weren't shouts of rebellion, they were whispers of revelation. Each sentence broke an invisible chain that had bound the city for generations. And as he spoke, thunder rolled in the distant sea as if heaven was signing the decree. In the end, the king gave no answer. He sat in silence, paralyzed before the altar. The crowd began to quietly disperse, as if witnessing something sacred and terrifying. Malak was removed, his fate uncertain. But one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same. The city no longer needed sacrifice, it was already condemned. And the faith of one man, standing at the edge of the abyss, had lit up the darkness Nineveh had long tried to ignore. Now let me ask you, how many times do we ignore the signs just because they're too uncomfortable? How many truths do we bury in the name of comfort? The story of Nahum, of Malak, of Nineveh isn't just about the past. It's about us, about the structures we build, the silent pacts we make, and the courage we often lack to break free. Are we listening to the voices calling for change, or do we only pay attention when it's already too late? Or are we clinging to that? Deep down, we know is doomed to collapse. Divine justice is not revenge. It's an account settled with the truth. And Nahum's prophecy still echoes today. Nothing built on lies and corruption will stand. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you reflect on what you've built in your life and your faith, your relationships, your choice to not let it go, share it with someone. Reread it. Ask questions. What kind of foundation is holding up your life? What do you need to bring into the light before it all falls apart? And of course, if you want to keep exploring stories like this deep, symbolic, and full of spiritual revelation, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Here, every video is an invitation to transformation, and every story hides a key that just might unlock something inside of you.